Business Math book, and we're in section 7. We're going to try to go over 7, 8, and 9, and then you can do your problems and then on to your quizzes and tests. So this is the second part, for your second test. So on to Business Math. Section 7 is about income, cost of goods sold, and operating expenses. It says here to keep a business operating and organized, 3 more areas of accounting must be used. Those areas are your income, your cost of goods sold, and your operating expenses. So what are these? First of all, income is the revenue or money that you received. Cost of goods, let's put it right here. I wrote it down on some notes here so you can see and to take notes. The cost of goods is the amount of business paid for the merchandise for sale. So it's the cost of goods are your merchandise and what you paid for your merchandise, right? And utilities can be a lot of things. They can be your employee wages, your insurance that you have to pay for, your property taxes that you're paying for. All of these are operating expenses. That have to do with, well, not just utilities. Utilities would be one of them. Actually, all of these are called operating expenses. So 3 things: income, the revenue money that you receive in, cost of goods sold, that's the amount of money you paid for your merchandise, and then on to your utilities, or I should say operating expenses. Utilities is a name, but utilities, you think of PG&E, which could be utilities or whatever, but just think of operating expenses. So those expenses you have to subtract to see if you've made money, right? So let's suppose here's an example. Suppose you own a bicycle shop. You must buy some bicycles and bicycle accessories. Then you sell the items to the customers. The amount of the customers paid is called the income, right? The amount a business person pays is called the cost of goods sold. So the business paid whatever you, as you bought these, the cost of your merchandise. All other expenses to the business besides the cost of goods are sold are the operating expenses. So here's a picture of it. So let's go through your examples here so you can see. Ron Thompson sold $15 in bicycle tires, $18 in bicycle parts, and 5 bicycles that were $229 each. What was the total income? So you know how to do this. This is pretty easy. So the cost per bicycle is $229, sold 5 of them. So you multiply that. And this is the income that you brought in. This is the money you brought in. And then it says to find the total income, add all the sales together. So you basically have, your bicycles, and now you also have your tires, your parts, and the bicycle sales up here, and you add them all together and you'll get the total income. So the total income would be $1,178. It's just adding up all these different parts. So that's not really very hard. So the questions here probably won't be so hard, but let's go on to down in the bottom here. It says, always look at these little bottom parts because they have some things you probably need to know for the test. Your bicycle business may already have an inventory of bicycles on hand, but you will most likely purchase more bicycles to be sold during the month. At the end of the month, you'll usually have an inventory left over. The cost for your month is the original cost as an owner for the merchandise that you sold. In this situation, you may not know how much you actually sold unless you use the following equations. So we're talking about the cost of goods in your inventory. So you take the goods that are available for sale. That means the goods you already have in your inventory, and you add that beginning inventory. And maybe you added to that, you purchased some more inventory, so you better add that to it. And so now you can have, that's your inventory now, the beginning inventory, and the merchandise purchases are your inventory. And then the cost of goods sold would be the goods available for sale. That's the goods available for sale. That's your inventory you have now, minus the inventory that's left over. So basically what you want to find out is exactly how many things, how much inventory you sold. So You begin with your inventory that you had, then you add any extra purchases that you purchased, and then you take that amount and then you subtract it for the inventory that you have left, so you can find exactly what your goods available for sale were. So, or the cost of goods sold, I should say, was. So you'll see this in your examples. Okay, let's do the example. The inventory at the beginning of the year of Julia's Spas and Baths was worth $125,200. During the year, he purchased $1,648 in merchandise that was more. If Julio had $260,080 in inventory at the end of the year, was his total cost of goods sold? So let's find out. So first of all, you look at the beginning inventory. That's the beginning of the month. You had $125,200 worth of inventory in goods you have, merchandise. And then you bought some more. So you add that, and that we bought quite a bit more. You added merchandise of $1,648 merchandise purchases. So, well, just basically adding this together. I might have little mistakes because my eyes are really bothering me to see this. So, this is basically 1,773,200 goods available for sale. So basically, you're going to add what you have and the more that you bought. So this is how much you have. This is how much merchandise you have to sell. Quite a bit here. And so now it says you want to know if Julio had $260,800 inventory at the end of the year. So that's what he ended at the end of the year. This is yearly, not monthly, I guess. So you take this number and then you'd subtract what he had left at the end of the year to find out how much you sold. So you sold $1,512,400 cost of goods sold at the end of the year. So basically just think, what was the beginning inventory? Did you add to that inventory? So you add it together, and then you subtract those that are left over at the end of the year to find out what your cost of goods were sold. And that's what we want to know there. So let's look here. Now, there's an answer here, I know, but what I want to do is not to even look at this answer just to see. I'm not going to add, you'll have to do the adding and stuff, but basically you'll see how this is done. So let's just put this like this first one. So we have the beginning inventory of $487,699, and we purchased more. We purchased $2,866,384. So we need to sell all of these. This is our merchandise, and so the goods available for sale, we have $3,354,000. So we just added this, and we get this one. Now at the end of the year, this is what we have left. So that means we sold quite a bit. So we, at the end of the year, we take this number when we subtract our end inventory. And so we get the cost of goods sold by taking this number and subtracting this number, and we get this number. It goes to the next one. You can kind of just see the answers here, how the answers differ. So number 2, beginning inventory. And then we added more purchases. And so we add this and this, and these are the goods available for sale. So we have $311,276 if you added this and this. And now at the end of the year, this is our inventory at the end of the year. We need to subtract that to find out what was our cost of goods sold. So you subtract this, take this, subtract this, and you got this, $232,653. Let's do this one. Here's the beginning inventory. Here's the merchandise. You add these two, and this is how much you have to sell. Now you added these two, you bought some more, so you have all these to sale, goods available for sale. And now your ending inventory was $6,287.16. So you still have some inventory there, but you have to subtract that to find out the cost of goods sold. So you just take 51,558.81, subtract this, and this is what you got, 45. So this is actually the cost of goods sold. This is how much money you made off your goods, your goods that were sold, your merchandise. Okay, let's do the last one. Same thing. We had beginning inventory, merchandise purchases. You add these two together and you get the goods available for sale. So this is what we have available for sale now. And then we sold them, but we have 30,000 left. So we didn't sell as much, right? But we did, the cost of goods sold is 12,192. Cost of goods sold, okay? So that is pretty easy so far. So let's keep going. You need to find the cost to produce one single item. If this is your case, then the division can be used as a tool. So now we're going to talk about division. You know what division is. Division helps you determine how many times one number is contained in another number. The number that you're dividing is called the dividend. The dividend is the number that you're dividing. The dividend is divided by the divisor, and that produces a quotient. So these will be test questions. So the dividend is the number that you're dividing. The divisor is that number that's dividing it. The dividend is divided by the divisor, and the answer is called a quotient. Okay, so remember that. So let's go over some of your examples here. Here's one. When Ron Thompson received a shipment of 16 junior racing bicycles, he paid the cycles distributors $3,024 for shipment. What was the cost of goods sold per bicycle? Okay, basically you have how many bicycles, or how many junior racing bicycles here? 16. So you take this 3,204 and you're going to divide it by 16. You divide this by 16 and you find out that each bicycle was $189 each. So not too hard. When you are dividing, now we're going to talk about when you're dividing a decimal. Of course, decimals, money are in decimals, right? And so when you're dividing a decimal by a whole number, place the decimal point in the quotient directly above the decimal point in the dividend. So here's how it goes. So here we go. When you're dividing, basically they're saying, okay, you're going to divide 15 into here. You place that decimal point right above there, right? So then you can, when you divide out, you know, you'll say basically 15 goes into 17, 15. You know how you do division. 2, carry down the 0, 1, and then make sure you put the, basically right above here, the decimal point's going to be right above here. You should have learned this a long time ago in decimals, but that's where the decimal point's going to be when you're dividing out a problem. So let's go on to this last part. If your divisor contains a decimal point, move the decimal point right of the last digit in the divisor. Also move the decimal point in the dividend to the right as many places as you move the decimal point in the divisor. In other words, you are multiplying both the divisor and dividend by a power of 10. Remember that the decimal point in a whole number is not written, but is understood. It's sometimes necessary for you to annex zeros in order to have enough places to move the decimal point. So let's look at the example for that. First example, example 5 here, shows us how to do this. Basically, you have a decimal point in the divisor here. This is the divisor and this is the dividend. So you have to, before you even start, you need to move this over 1, 2 places. So you move it over 2 places, and you have to move this over 2 places if you move that, 1, 2. And so there you put the decimal point right there. And now you can do the problem and just move that decimal point up so you know where that decimal point is going to be. So you say 23 times 6 is 138. You subtract here, you get 46, 23 times 2, so it's 6.2. Just make sure you move that, that's moving that decimal point over. So here's another decimal problem. To move the decimal point in the dividend, it will be necessary to annex 3 zeros. So here we're supposed to move it over 3 places. Well, the decimal point's right here at the end, right? There's no decimal point, that means it's at the end. So here's the decimal point. If we move it over 1, 2, 3 places, well, 1, 2, 3 places, we have to put in 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3 zeros, and then put it up here. And then we can put our, 615 goes into 1,232 times, and then have to add those 2 zeros before. So it'd be 200. So this will go in 200. Just make sure because this is a decimal point here, you're moving a 1, 2, 3, and then you move this decimal point 3 places, but you have to add the zeros. Here's another example of decimal point move. Oh, this is round the quotient off to the nearest cent. So whenever you have money, you don't like to deal with, 4/10 of a cent. So they always round off. So basically, figuring this out here, that basically 13 goes in 22, 710, whatever. You're going to, as you calculate this whole thing, you get 1.746. Well, you round the 6 to a 5. So 4 rounds up. So it'd be 1.75, just round up. You guys know how to round. So basically, make sure you round to the cent. When you're dollars and cents, you shouldn't go less than a penny. Okay, let's go on here. There's a lot of exercises for you to do. You can pick and choose those you want to do. Let's go on to profit or loss. There's a review there, but I'm not going to go through the review. So you can go through the review if you like. So profit and loss. Okay, of course your goal in business is to make a profit. Unfortunately, some businesses suffer losses. In fact, many small businesses close each year because they have excessive losses. So basically, how do you know if you have excessive loss? As a business owner, you must keep accurate records that let you know where your business stands. You need to know the net sales, cost of goods, or I should say cost of goods sold, the gross profit, the operating expenses, and the net profit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 6 things that we've gone through. So net sales, what is net sales? Net sales is your income, from sales. That's, the money that you've taken in from sales. That's your net sales. And net sales is your income from sales less that's your income from sales, but you have to take off any returns. So say you made a bunch of money on selling clothing, but then you had a bunch of people bring back stuff. So you have to subtract that because you really didn't make money if they brought their stuff back. So your net sales is your income from sales less any sales, returns, or allowances are made. So it's the net sales are the sales minus your return or allowances. Any returns, that's your net sale. Gross profit. Once you have your net sales, you want to find out what your gross profit is. To do this, the gross profit can be found by subtracting the cost of goods sold, the cost to produce your product from the net sales. So you take to get the gross profit, you take this net sales here, and then you're going to subtract the cost of goods sold. That cost of goods sold that you actually sold. You'll have inventory. Remember we just did in the last part. You'll have, your merchandise at the beginning, the merchandise that you added to that, and then minus your inventory at the end, and you have the cost of goods sold. So you have net sales minus the cost of goods sold. You'll get the gross profit. The gross profit, of course, is going to be less than the net sales. So let's find out how we do this. Lynn Balius owns a clothing boutique. Her total sales for the month were $17,685, but $1,193 worth of merchandise was returned. What were her net sales? Okay, this is just telling what the net sales are. So you take this first number, this is how much sales, and then you subtract the returns and you get the net sales. Remember, this is net sales. The net sales is basically subtracting the returns, any returns or allowances. Okay, that's the example 1. The next is Miss Bayless buys her clothing from a well-known wholesale clothing factory. If the cost of goods Mrs. Bayless cost was $10,625 for the last month, what was her gross profit for the month? Okay, so we have $10,625. That was if the cost of goods sold. Basically, that was her cost of goods sold. We're talking about, okay, what was her? We're talking about these two problems together. So her net sales up here was $16,492 was her net sales. We took off the returns, and this is her net sales. But the cost of goods now for the last month was $10,625. She had to pay for her merchandise that much money. So she's going to have to take off what she paid for her merchandise. Those are the cost of goods sold profit. So she ends up subtracting subtracting from the net sales, that cost of goods, and she gets the gross profit, which is $5,867. That's her gross profit that she made quite a bit there. So those are the profits. Those are profit, but sometimes you have loss, and that's what we're going to get into next. There's a bunch of equations here for you to go over, just dealing with those examples, but let's look here. So you can complete this chart. So basically we have on this chart, we have your sales, net sales, we have your sales, and you have your returns, and that will equal your net sales. And then we have your cost of goods sold, and this will be your gross profit. So just like a line. First of all, you bring in your money. You got $22,680. Then you got a bunch of people returning stuff, which is $1,429 return. So you subtract that. So your net sales were actually $21,251. So let's kind of go like this so you can see where we're looking. Right? And so now you subtract. Basically subtract. Now you have this. Now you have the cost of goods. That money, the cost of goods that sold, how much you paid for that stuff that you sold, and your cost of goods sold was $6,900. So you have to subtract that from your net sales, and this is your profit, $14,271. The next one's the same way. You have the sales, $188,200. And your returns, you have $19,000 in returns. You have to subtract and you get your net sales. So this is your net, what you took in for your net sales. But now you got to figure out what you paid for your cost of goods that were sold. And this is $68,425. So you have to subtract that. So it's subtract. And now you found out your gross profit was $100,000. Same with the next one. We have the sales, $29,650. Returns $999, and you subtract this from this, and you'll get $28,000. Now the cost of goods sold, you have to subtract from your net sale, and you get your gross. See how this goes? Same for the next one. $4,820 minus your returns. You had only $14 of returns. There's your net sales. Now you have to subtract how much you paid for the cost of the goods that you sold. And then you get your gross profit. And the next one's the same way. If you go through each one of these, and you'll have to keep going through them. So you see how it goes. So once you have figured your gross profit, do not forget to subtract your operating expenses. If your expenses are less than the gross profit, you are operating in a net profit. But if your expenses are more than your gross profit, you are operating at a net loss. You cannot operate very long at a net loss. So now you're going to take that gross profit and you're going to subtract all of your expenses, other expenses. So you're going to take, basically, net profit equals gross. We're talking about net profit. We're not talking about net sales anymore. We're talking about net profit or net loss. So you take your gross profit, you take the money that you made here, subtract your expenses, and then see, are you going to be in the hole or not? So say that your expenses are more than your gross profit. If your expenses are more than your profit is, then you are at a loss. So, and we have to figure these out, if you're at a loss or not. So here's an example. When the bills came due for Miss Vela's clothing boutique, she paid $1,200 for rent, $2,880 for wages, $320 for insurance, $689 for other expenses. If her gross profit, now this is the gross profit that we had up here, this gross profit that we think, oh, we made this. Well, now we have to subtract the expenses and see if our expenses are more than what we made. And so we add all the expenses together, all these numbers, take them all and add them together. We got $5,269 in total expenses. And so now we got to, we basically look at what the gross profit was. What did we say? $5,086. So her gross profit was $5,867, and her total expenses were $5,269. So we subtract that, and her net profit was only $598. But she's still in the profit. She's not in the hole yet. So do the next example. The next month, Lynn Bayless needed unexpected repair work done to her home due to the bad storm. Her total expenses were $7,683. Her gross profit was $6,690. She was operating at a net profit or a net loss. What was her net profit or loss? So here were her expenses. $7,683 were expenses, and then that was her expenses. So this is her expenses, and her gross profit was only $669.91. So she's going to be in the hole. She has a profit of this, but her expenses are more. So you just subtract it, and then they're at a net loss. She's at a net loss because you have to subtract the gross payment from the expenses, and you get in the red, basically negative. So she's at a net loss of $992. Whenever you subtract these and you get expenses more, you're going to be at a loss. Okay? So let's go over, show this exercise here as this goes through. So now we're kind of start at the beginning of what we just learned, and here's our sales, just like we did it before. Here's our sales, here's our returns. So we can subtract here and get our net sales, because we made this much money, $75,251, but we had this much returned. So now our net sales is only $69,448. And then our cost of the goods, we have to subtract that, and then we get our gross profit, which is $27,718. But we have our expenses. So we subtract our expenses from here, the gross profit minus the expenses. We get the net profit or loss. If we subtract the expenses are more, $28,000. The gross profit is $27,000. So if we find the difference between these two, we're going to have $734, and it's going to be loss because the expenses are more. You get it? Let's do the next one. $14,800, and you had $483 of return minus and our net sales. So now we subtracted those returns. We get $14,317. And now the cost that we had to pay for the goods is $7,000. So we have to subtract that. So we got our gross profit at $6,997. And we have to subtract the expenses. Well, the expenses look like they're not as much as the profit. So it looks like we made something. So we subtract these two numbers and we get $5,983. Find the difference, and it's a profit because the expenses are more. Let's do the next one. So $648,000. Subtract the returns there. You get the net sales of $615,248. Then you subtract. So basically, you're subtracting, and then you get the gross profit after you subtract the cost of goods, the gross profit. You get then you get basically from this point you have the expenses. Look, this is where we're looking. The expenses now are $193,813, and you made $205,000. So the expenses again are less. So you did make something. You subtract these two amounts, and you made $12,000.43 profit. Let's do this one here. It looks like a $1,514, and you had $16 worth of return, so you had $1,498 net sales. And this is what you paid for your merchandise here. Your cost of goods, you subtract that, you get gross profit was $595. So, but your expenses was $627. So it looks like the expenses are more. So when you subtract these two, you're going to get $32, but it's going to be a loss. You lost $32. So I'm not going to do the other ones, but you see how you go through each one. So. Okay. I'm going to stop right there, and then we'll do the last part of 8 and 9 in another video, and then go over your tests.